What's going on, everybody? C4 here. Welcome to today's video, which is going to continue our 2019 draft prep as we look at my top 10 tight ends for the upcoming draft class. Now, I do need to kind of apologize because I don't, obviously I get these videos are kind of niche and I want to mix in, Madden and all that stuff. So it's not just like, oh, well, I don't want to watch C4 anymore. He's just doing draft videos. But unfortunately, my kid's been sick the last couple days, not going to school. So my time to be able to sit down and play Madden has been severely compromised. So it's much easier to do these videos where obviously it's like more of a slideshow format than it is Madden. But don't get twisted. On Saturday, tomorrow, gonna be a rebuild. On Sunday, we're gonna do a big replacements video. Then on Monday, I might hit you guys with a flashback franchise trying to utilize that 2002 Madden 19 roster mod. But today, just to get something out to you guys, because I gotta get done. I gotta get through all the positions, so why not? We have my tight end rankings. Now, this is a very good draft class for tight ends. I'm going to be dead ass honest with you. Probably 9. Even all 10 of these guys, I think. Usually for tight ends, I might just do 5. Best 5. That's what we did the first time. Because, how many times is there really a tight end that can make an impact as a rookie? I think there's going to be 6 for sure that I think can have big time. Well, maybe not big time. It's all relative. But big-time contributions to at least where they are drafted. And I think, all 10 of these guys that I am going to talk about will land on Final 53s, not messing around with any practice squad players. But without further ado, we're going to talk about our tight end rankings 1. And the first time we did this, tight ends, only literally a month ago, was maybe the most toughest positions area to predict because there's so many underclassmen that we didn't really know who's going to declare. But my honorable mentions for my first rankings that we did, early in the college football season, I had Smith Jr. and Sternburger as my honorable mentions just because I had no idea if they were going to declare or not. My top 5, at 5, I had Tommy Sweeney from Boston College. At 4, Kaden Smith from Stanford. 3, Caleb Olson from UCLA. 2, Albert O. I'm not even going to butcher his last name. Akwibunam, probably something like that. From Missouri, and number 1 was Noah Fant. So as all that has kind of cleared up, we have our full draft board. I was pretty confident in my top 10. I'll say from 7 to 10, kind of interchangeable, but outside of that, I like my top 6 for sure. But before we jump into my top 10 rankings, we got to look at the honorable mentions. I got 4 names to talk about. First up, I have Tommy Sweeney, who was originally at my number 5. He's just, a predominantly blocking tight end. But I think he's going to be a guy that probably will go later in the draft, and I think he has a really good shot of sticking on a Final 53. We have Josh Oliver from San Diego State. Receiving tight end, had really good numbers. Obviously, pretty limited, glorified wide receiver type. We have Dax Raymond, who all reports say that he has had a really good Senior Bowl. Going to be interested to see how well he tested the combine. Again, more of a receiving tight end. And then we have Donald Parham. Just a freaky nature at the Senior Bowl. Had ridiculous measurements. Converted wide receiver. Might actually be viewed as a wide receiver. He's kind of like a Dorial Green Beckham type. But, this guy, I think he had one of the biggest wingspans I've ever seen on a player. So he's very intriguing prospect. But I think more so for him, kind of a practice squad guy. So that being said, let's go into the top 10 tight ends for the draft class. At number 10, I have C.J. Conrad, 6'5", 250 pounds, out of Kentucky in 2018. He had 30 receptions, 320 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, you kind of see with a lot of these stats, none of them are staggering. None of these numbers are going to go, wow, eye-popping. I think, in terms of, numbers that might get those of you that don't really watch college football or those of you who don't really know much about the tight ends. 1, 2, 3. Maybe there's 3 stats out of all 10 of these guys that are impressive. But that kind of actually makes it a little bit more difficult because you really have to put emphasis on their tape. And there's going to be one common trend for a lot of these tight end prospects is going to be their combine for me because it's really tough to judge their athleticism. I want to see the power that doesn't always show up. I want to see maybe they have good straight line speed. Like no one really thought O.J. Howard was going to be as fast as he was or Evan Ingram was going to be as fast as he was. Even though we knew they were fast, we didn't know they were going to be wow fast. So that'll be a common trend throughout. But for C.J. Conrad, I think for the positive trend, he's a balanced tight end. He's really defined as a run blocker. And he's a guy that, for me, another positive is a chain mover. He's not going to be a guy that's going to get, 10, 15 yards of reception. But he's going to be a guy on third downs, third and short, third and 2, third and 3. He has enough skills to get open and catch that ball. The negatives for C.J. Conrad, I do think he's going to be a limited athlete, and I do think he has a limited ceiling. I think you're getting pretty close to a final player in C.J. Conrad. But I think he can be a second tight end, like a backup tight end for a lot of different teams. And he's, the fact that he's balanced, the fact that he does have some receiving ability, and he's not a liability in the blocking game, he'll definitely get picked up by a team. Going to tight end number 9, I have Keenan Brown, 6'3", 250 pounds, out of Texas State. In 2018, he had 51 catches, 580 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He has natural hands. He's really, really good yards after the catch style of player because he played a little bit of wide receiver. I'm pretty sure he was a wide receiver at Oklahoma State. I literally didn't write down. I remember I was reading about it when I was looking at his background. But you could see that he used to be a wide receiver at some point. You could see that, just that IQ, that mentality that wide receivers have. As soon as after the catch, you want to look to get more yards. Whereas you maybe have more tight ends that just want to make sure they make the catch, make sure they get the first down, and everything after that is bonus. I think a guy like Keenan Brown looks for that right away. And the negatives is, he was a converted wide receiver, so he still is learning the position. Again, obviously coming up against not the strongest level of competition for a pretty decent stat line in 2018. And because he is a converted wide receiver, his blocking is not that great, and he kind of will be a one-dimensional tight end at the next level. Still will find a role. I think he'll probably, I think he has a ceiling of maybe the 5th round, but he definitely, I think like CJ Conrad, will get drafted at some point. Going to tight end number 8, we have Isaac Nauta, 6'4", 240 pounds, out of Georgia. In 2018, he had 30 catches, 430 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I remember way back. This is where I'm starting to get old. I remember when Nauta was like a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. When you look at the positive, he's well-rounded. He's a good blocker. Obviously, you have to block playing for Georgia, and I think his stats, if you look at all of his stats in his career, Georgia does not have a good passing attack, but when he has been utilized, he has been good. And so I think he is a complete tight end. He's a great athlete. I think he will help his draft stock at the Combine, which kind of goes into the negatives, is because the Combine will be important to show how athletic he is, and if he doesn't quite match up with how I feel his tape shows, it could negatively affect his draft stock, obviously. And he does have limited production. Even though it is a scheme, and most teams probably will give him a little bit of a pass because of the scheme, still, teams that will get a guy that has just caught, some of these other tight ends have caught 40, 50 balls for 2-3 years. Maybe they will get more of a, more of a check mark than a guy that just has limited production. You kind of have to project, well, if he was in a different scheme, he would put up these numbers, versus guys that were in those schemes and did put up those numbers. You know what I'm saying? So going to tight end number 7, we have Zach Gentry, 6'8", 260 pounds from Michigan. In 2018, he had 32 catches for 500 yards and 2 touchdowns. Look at the positives. Red zone mismatch. This guy is a gigantic human being, and I think he has a generous ceiling. He originally was a quarterback, which is the only negative I really have for him right now. He's a converted quarterback, so he's a project. He's a guy that has, he's a guy that might actually end up on a practice squad, get drafted high, and clearly, you want to try to develop a little bit. I think he is far enough along that most teams are comfortable, maybe making him a tight end 3, or some teams, if you don't have a whole lot of depth, make him a tight end 2. But because of that size, the fact that he's not that bad of a blocker, like you would assume anytime someone converts from one position to another, unless you're like an offensive lineman, you're probably going to be more of a receiver than you are a run blocker. But he has good size. He utilizes that size in the run game, and obviously you get, what you get here. And a good athlete of a 6'8" in stature, he's going to be pretty good at catching the ball, especially in the red zone. So he's a mismatch nightmare, and he definitely will get picked up by a team. I think for him, probably mid-rounds. I'd say, around 4-5, somewhere in that territory. Could slip into the 6, depending on how well the Combine goes. Going to tight end number 6. Now, this is where I start to get into, tight ends that I almost know and guarantee will be good as rookies. We have Caleb Wilson, 6'4", 235 pounds, out of UCLA. In 2018, he had 60 catches, 965 yards, and 4 touchdowns. When you look at the positives for Caleb Wilson, he's an excellent receiver. He has tremendous hands, and his route running ability is very, very good. Maybe some of the best in the class. He probably is the best pure receiving tight end, I think, in this class. I mean, we're clearly going to talk about Noah Fant at some point, and he's maybe the most popular tight end that a lot of you guys might have heard of. So then Caleb Wilson, more natural hands than Noah Fant has. But look at the size difference. I mean, 6'4", 235. I think that's a generous 235. He might come in closer to 230 at the Combine, but he is a tremendous receiver. Looking at the negatives, clearly blocking. I mean, he's as big as some wide receivers technically, so you're not going to get a whole lot out of him out of the run blocking game. The Combine will be important because his speed on tape doesn't necessarily always show up. So when you get a guy like that that's slightly undersized for a tight end that he's a receiver, you kind of want them to kind of hold their own when it comes to the Combine and running in shorts and that 40-yard dash time. So I think if Caleb Wilson can get, in the low 4.6s, maybe 4.5s, creep into there, it would definitely help his stock out a lot, maybe even enough to jump up into the top 5. But for right now, you're getting a pure, glorified receiver playing at tight end. But luckily enough, in today's NFL, that is the growing trend. Going to tight end number 5, we have Kaden Smith, 6'5", 250 pounds, out of Stanford. 2018, he had 47 receptions, 635 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Look at the positives of Kaden Smith. He has excellent hands, a very high ceiling. Something that I kind of noticed in his gameplay, and I confirmed on a couple other different scouting reports. Man, he goes up and gets the ball. Like, if it's a 50-50 ball, it's a ball that's thrown across the middle of the field. He is going to come down with it, even if it's contested or not. So, definitely a spot for that in the NFL. And he's a Stanford tight end. Stanford has just, I would say, like to think Stanford is tight end you. They produce NFL caliber tight ends almost every single year. You get Zach Ertz, you got Colby Fleener, Austin Hooper. I feel like even there's still a couple other ones in there that I'm just missing, like backups that actually were able to find themselves on the rosters. So he does have that going for him. When you look at negatives for Kaden Smith, it's just kind of tough to judge his athletic ability off his tape, so it does put a little bit of weight and importance on the combine, more so than other prospects. I think his blocking right now is average. It's not really a big-time negative. It's just, I think he's an okay blocker. But if we're trying to separate guys in the top 5 and really put them in terms of who's going to be the best right away and who's going to be the best in their career, I'm going to go with guys that might have a little bit better in the blocking, or they're a little bit better in the receiving. He's just kind of right below that elite receiving tight end, and he's nowhere near the best blocking tight end in the class. But he still is going to be really good. I think he'll probably will go third, fourth round, somewhere in that territory. My pro comparison for him is, I hate when I compare guys that went to the same school, but I think Austin Hooper. For the Atlanta Falcons, who's been, kind of underrated, I think, for his stats. He's a solid tight end. He's never going to be a top 5 tight end, I don't think, but he's going to be that guy that's going to huddle around that top 10 territory, and I definitely think that would be the ceiling for Kaden Smith. Going to tight end number 4, we have Sternburger, 6'4", 250 pounds, out of Texas A&M. In 2018, he had 48 receptions, 830 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Looking at the positives, he is a great receiver, has upside as a blocker, definitely a willing blocker. And if I had to take a tight end that I didn't really... I literally found out about him. I didn't find out about him from looking at scouting reports or anything. I was watching just a Texas A&M game. I was like, who the hell's that tight end? I've never heard of that guy. There's Sternburger guy in my life, but look at the plays he's making. And then from that, I looked in and was like, oh, yeah, well, he has a kind of extensive background. Limited production is the big negative for Sternburger. He's only played 1 full year at A&M. I think he went to Kansas or something like that. Didn't really play ever. And then he had 1 big year at Texas A&M. But, yeah, man, Jimbo got the most out of him. I really like him. I'm going to say out of my top 5, I had to pick one guy that's not getting talked about enough that I think might have the biggest impact for tight ends that I think are getting disrespected. It is going to be Sternburger. For my pro comparison, I'm giving Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews from Oklahoma. His last year with Oklahoma was fairly similar to what Sternburger did this year. Kind of a friendly offense, if you will. But we all saw Mark Andrews pretty much outshine Hayden Hurst for the Baltimore Ravens this year. I thought that was ridiculous that they drafted both those guys. And I personally liked Mark Andrews more than I liked Hayden Hurst last year. And I think, getting another Mark Andrews, a guy that definitely looks like an emerging tight end, that'd be good value there for Sternburger. I personally feel Sternburger might actually go a little bit lower, or would it be higher? It'd be higher in the draft than Kaden Smith. I can see Kaden Smith going to more teams than Sternburger, but still, I'd give Sternburger probably that 4-5 range, maybe third rounder if he tests well at the combine. But again, he's a receiving tight end. Obviously, with the production and the fact that he has really reliable hands, I think teams are going to fall in love with his upside. And maybe go in the third round. Personally, I would put a third round grade on him, but I could just see teams liking Kaden Smith coming from Stanford and kind of putting him ahead. Going to tight end number 3, we have Irv Smith Jr., 6'3", 240 pounds, out of Alabama. In 2018, he had 44 receptions, 700 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He is a complete tight end. That is a big positive. He is a tremendous run blocker. It showed up in pretty much... unfortunately, I watch a lot of Alabama games. No choice of my own. They're always there. I was like, man, this guy here, he really likes to chip in. Obviously, you have to run block at Alabama. They're a team that loves to establish the line of scrimmage, and he's really good hands. I was kind of surprised when I first saw him. I was like, this guy's kind of a run blocker, a little bit small. Looks like a wide receiver out there, like a kind of a bulkier wide receiver. But he has really good hands, and I was surprised with the run blocking. I was like, okay, I'm in on Irv Smith. Not as good as maybe O.J. Howard. I know a lot of people want to compare him to O.J. Howard. But that kind of goes in the negative. He's a little bit undersized. I don't think he's as good of an athlete either as O.J. Howard, but a pro comparison for Irv Smith is Delanie Walker. Delanie Walker's a guy with great hands. I don't know if he's as refined yet. And I'm talking about Irv Smith and route running and all that stuff as Delanie Walker was, and obviously established himself because he kind of was underrated coming out of the draft. But you know, as terms of like, give me Delanie Walker's best year and compare that to, you know, somehow find a way to compare that to what Alabama and Irv Smith did this season. You know, very similar, a lot of similarities. And I think from a play style standpoint, Delanie Walker is a underrated, very, very underrated run blocker, because we all know he's maybe the top target when he is healthy there in Tennessee. But not enough people give Delanie Walker credit for his run block, and I feel like that's kind of the same consensus around Irv Smith. And if you want a complete tight end and you can get it past him being slightly undersized, I think Irv Smith, you know, I don't know if I'm buying this first round hype that I've been seeing around on mock drafts. It could happen. It could happen, especially if he tests better than expects at the combine. But I'm probably going to say Irv Smith for me is going to be a mid-second round to early third round pick. Going to tight end number 2, we have TJ Hawkinson, 6'5", 250 pounds, out of Iowa. In 2018, he had 49 receptions, 760 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He also got the Mackey Award this year, which is the best tight end in college football award. Looking at the positive, again, another complete tight end. He is a really, really good run blocker. Watching his tape, and I've actually seen some reports from people that are, you know, diehard Iowa fans. You know, obviously, Iowa, kind of like Alabama, maybe even more so at Iowa, you have to run block. And I've seen a bunch of Iowa fans say Hawkinson is maybe the best run blocking tight end Iowa's had in forever. And you got to think, you know, George Kittle was a freak and obviously broke the record last year for receiving yards and stuff like that, like complete style tight ends. So, you know, really good from that standpoint. Clearly from a receiving standpoint, he has that NFL prototypical build. And I think he has a really, really high ceiling. I think he has obviously a little bit limited playing experience because there's just always, you know, Noah Fant was ahead of him for the last couple of years. So I do think he has a little bit more to go, a little bit more to grow. When you look at the negatives for Hawkinson, I just think another one of these players, the combine is going to be important to show his athleticism. Does it show up on tape all the time? You know, for Hawkinson, we got to wait and see. He's not as athletic, say, as Noah Fant. He's not as athletic as George Kittle. But how close is he to that? I think he could be kind of close. So my pro comparison for TJ Hawkinson's Greg Olson. I think he's going to be a little bit slower because G-Reg with that third leg out of the U ran a 4.51 at the combine. I think Hawkinson's probably going to be more of a maybe a low 4.6, somewhere in that range. But still, the fact that he has that prototypical size, he has the complete tight end label underneath his belt. I think there's a chance he goes in the first round. For me, I think he's going to be a very early second round pick. But if he has a really good combine, if he can somehow, some way run high 4.5s, he could definitely go in the first round. But tight end number 1, and this is like the first time I think I've ever had 2 prospects from the same school, 1 and 2. I have Noah Fant, 6'5", 240 pounds, out of Iowa. In 2018, he had 39 receptions, 520 yards, and 7 touchdowns. We look at Noah Fant, he is an elite athlete. He is a guy that I think can potentially challenge Evan Ingram for that ridiculous 40-yard dash time. What Ingram ran? Something in the 4.4s or something like that. 4.43 was it? I'm going to literally Google it right now because I think Noah Fant has a chance. I'm not going to say he is because Evan Ingram clearly is a wide receiver playing tight end. Big wide receiver. Evan Ingram ran a 4.42. I think Noah Fant 4.4 speed. I don't know if he can break 4.42, but I can see him getting like a 4.46, 7.8, somewhere in that territory. And the fact that he's 10, 15 pounds heavier than what Evan Ingram was coming out of Ole Miss, offers a little bit more in the run blocking game. Even though that is my negative for him, he's always going to kind of have limitations as a run blocker. But when you get a guy like Noah Fant, you draft a guy like Noah Fant, who I think is definitely a first round caliber tight end. I think he will go in the first round. You know, do you really want to, underutilize him, trying to have him as a blocker? You want to have him just be a mismatch and put up against linebackers and safeties. But Noah Fant is an elite athlete. He's a good receiver. I don't think he's great yet. That's kind of what I put in my notes. Occasionally there'll be some, drop. What the hell? Kind of drops. You know what I'm saying? No, how'd you drop that? Kind of drops. But you definitely can see. I like to see when I see wide receivers that are more consistent than not. That usually means that they can develop their way out of it. And I think Noah Fant does have that upside. So when I look at a pro comparison for Noah Fant, I was kind of, I've seen a lot of people comparing to Eric Ebron. I personally, I'm going to go with Jared Cook. When Jared Cook was coming out, I think out of South Carolina, he had, let me get the combine up here. Always want to have the combine. Should probably have it written down. But Jared Cook ran a 4.50. He was a kind of a converted wide receiver, 6'5", 246, so very similar body types. But you look at Jared Cook right now. I mean, now I think Jared Cook's been disrespected a little bit. Obviously, he went to the Rams, was a pretty shit offense. Then he moved on to the Packers, had that one big play. Thank you very much against the Cowboys. But I think we're seeing what Jared Cook and what I think Noah Fant will bring almost as a rookie right now in a little bit later in his career, what he did with the Raiders last season. I think he made the Pro Bowl. He was a dynamic receiver at times and probably ultimately was Derek Carr, the #1 receiving threat on that team. I think that's kind of what you could see from Noah Fant, a tremendous athlete, a guy that's going to be a mismatch wherever you put him on the field. You might even be able to get him in some slot reps. But I think a guy like Noah Fant, because what he brings from an athletic standpoint and an upside standpoint, can emerge as a potential #1 target for a team's offense in the National Football League. That's ultimately why I have him at my #1 spot versus, say, a Hawkinson or an Irv Smith that might be a little bit more complete in a receiving run blocking standpoint. So there you go, guys. Those are my top 10 tight ends for the upcoming draft. As always, if you agree or disagree with any of the ratings that you saw today, let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe if it's your first time stopping by. This is only beginning. Only the beginning for 2019 draft content. And yeah, that's gonna do it for me today, guys. Like I said, apologies. I know that these videos aren't for everyone. I know they do very, very well for me, but I know like I want to ideally have at least at minimum a day, maybe perfectly 2 days, where I have like maybe a draft video, Madden, NCAA Madden kind of thing, and then another draft video. But just because, like I said, because my kid was sick and these videos are a lot easier for me to make in limited time, that's why you're getting them back to back. But we're going to be going back to straight Madden for a little bit, and we'll get a better balance next week. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all the continued support. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace